This is Issues Paninyaya, a Chengeto Zimbabwe initiative supported by I Am Swedish Development Partner. Issues Paninyaya seeks to challenge the status quo on various social issues.
It's a Monday night and we're back on Issues Paninyaya. My name is Rejoice Naraunda Makawa. Many thanks to I Am Development Partner for supporting Issues Paninyaya. On the 12th of March 2018, we had Snikiwe in the studio talking to us about life in the shoes of a short girl. Snikiwe spoke about her disability and how it has impacted on her life. Snikiwe was very clear that disability is not inability and should not be treated like charity or welfare. Today we are continuing on the same trajectory where we look at disability from the angle of an organization that is working with the disabled as well as with caregivers of the disabled. I'm pleased to welcome Deaf Zimbabwe to Issues Paninyaya. Barbara is here to tell us about the work that Deaf Zimbabwe is doing and to go into what it is that disabled people do go through on a day-to-day basis and what they experience in terms of access in different spheres of social life. Good evening, Barbara, and welcome to Issues Paninyaya.
Good evening, Rejoice, and thank you for having me.
Now, the Constitution of Zimbabwe speaks to equality and inclusion of all. Am I correct?
90% of children with disabilities are not in school. Where are they?
So yes, that's the question I was going to ask. If 90% of the children who are disabled are not in school, then where are they and what are they doing wherever they are?
They're at home. They are sometimes in the streets being used to beg for money, at times by their caregivers. But the majority of them are in the home with the parent who, in many cases, does not know what to do because they would have tried to go to a local school to ask for support and say, I have a child and I would want them to come to school, and the school tells them that we don't know how to help your child. Go to such and such a school. They are referred to the few schools that are there in this country that are oversubscribed and under-supported.
Let's just back up a little bit because I want to unpack that particular point. But before we get there, maybe just tell us a little bit about the work that you are doing specifically. Who is Deaf Zimbabwe and what is it that you are doing as an organization?
Deaf Zimbabwe Trust is an organization that was started by parents of children who are deaf and hard of hearing. And our work focuses mostly on access to education because we believe that education is empowering. And without it, life can be very, very difficult. And so it is our flagship program. The work that we're currently doing is we're supporting policy reform to say that for disability education to have traction in this country, we need to reform the education system. We need to move away from the way we view children with disabilities, where we thought of them as charity cases, where we were looking at handouts and institutionalization for life. But right now we're looking at how do you empower a person with a disability to live the fullest life possible.
I'm aware that you're almost 5 years old. We were talking about this the other day. What prompted you as Barbara to start Deaf Zimbabwe?
We have a son who is deaf, and that was the motivation for starting Deaf Zimbabwe Trust. Many times as parents, especially in Zimbabwe, we trust our institutions, we trust our schools. You know, you bath your child, give them a lunchbox and say, go home, go to school, you know. And we believe that magic is going to be worked in that school. And I think for a long time, as parents, we trusted the education system that, well, as long as he's in school, learning is happening there. But the wake-up call came when one day I was told that your son has been removed from the academic class where he would write O-level and put in a woodwork class where he would just do cabinet making. And knowing that that is not his passion, that is not what he wanted for himself, it was such a wake-up call to say, what is going on here? Does it mean that all children with deafness are not able to, you know, cope with academic work, or it's the easiest route to take where we track children with disability to vocations because it's easy for us as a nation?
And that takes us back to where we started this conversation, where we were talking about 90% of disabled children not being in school, and us asking the question, Yekuti Saka, where are these children? Because the mainstream education system seems not to be accommodating those children. right?
Definitely.
We talked about these children being lumped into one classroom in the mainstream system, regardless of age and their needs or their disabilities. Do you want to just speak to that a little bit?
So you find that I think it's over a decade now, the government of Zimbabwe introduced the concept of a resource unit. A resource unit, in its conception, is a place where learners with disabilities are supposed to get support from while they are learning in the mainstream setting. So they would go to the resource unit for the different support that they have. For example, should it have worked the way it should have worked, then it means that for the deaf children in the resource units would be housed the sign language interpreters and the persons that are able to provide support in the appropriate language. In the resource unit would be housed the psychologists, the people that are the therapists, occupational therapists, the different professionals that would provide the needs and meet the needs of the different children in the school system. However, what then happened is that the resource unit became a place where we would put children. Yes, there are different resource units for children with VI, which is visual impairment, children who are deaf, learners with other disabilities also have different resource units. But what you found is that the resource unit itself became more stigmatized in the mainstream setting. So you have a situation where there is exclusion in inclusive settings. The child is there, yes, you can make a tick box and say, mwana arimo muchikoro arimo, but are they really part of that school is the question. And so what we have done is that, you know, when people say, the teachers actually mock other children saying, "Chakwendesa ku special class," you know, and this is supposed to be a place of hope, of support, where a child is able to get the necessary support that they need for them to make it in their educational life. But it's a source of, it's a punishment when the teacher will say to another child, "Ndichakuendesa ku special class."
And I want to use your son as a case study. But before we do that, I just want to call upon our listeners to get in touch. We're talking about disability. Share your experiences with us. We are on 0773910095 at Issues Paninyaya on Twitter, on our Facebook page, Issues Paninyaya. If your son is disabled, if your daughter is disabled, if you have a relative who is disabled, a child who is disabled, what is your experience in terms of education of your disabled child? Are they accessing education? If they are, where are they accessing it? Please let us share tonight. As we've got Barbara in the studio, we want to understand how the education system is being spread out in Zimbabwe. We're using your son, Barbara, as a case study. And there you had him being channeled towards vocation. I'm all for vocation, because I totally understand that not all children are going to be academic.
Absolutely.
So I believe in a holistic system
Sure.
that will cater for the different needs of children. I totally believe that not every child is going to be academic.
Absolutely.
And our education system needs to be inclusive in that manner.
Absolutely.
So that kana mwana ari oriented towards being one anoinda towards vocation, then they should be encouraged to be vocational.
True.
Kana ari academic wo ashidaro. But in the case of your son, there he is being pushed towards woodwork, when actually that is not what he wants to do, or that is not his forte.
Absolutely.
And what did you then decide to do about that, and what have you actually done about that in terms of Deaf Zimbabwe and where you're at now, 5 years down the line?
I think just to backtrack a bit, vocation is very, very important, but I'm a believer of choice as well. And so for me, agency is missing when, as the school, you do not take into account what are the aspirations of the child, what are the aspirations of the parents, because the school system, there is the three of us: the school, the parents, and the child, and this relationship has to continue and be consultative. And so when there is no agency, when the school makes a decision that has far-reaching implications into the future of the family and the child for generations, then there's something very wrong. Without consultation, without taking into account agency. So here is this young man who is supposed to do cabinet making absolutely bad with his hands. And I wouldn't sit on a chair that he makes for the fear of dear life. I would like my bones intact.
Right.
And so you are looking at a situation whereby the lack of a policy has resulted in schools making critical, life-altering decisions for learners. So in my mind came this, okay, so he goes to cabinet making. What would his peers, his age, be doing
whilst
he's making cabinets? They would be doing commerce. Commerce allows them to know what is advertising, what is insurance. Yes, you may fail the commerce, but you have taken something out of that. You may fail it at all level.
But
you now know that when you do a business, you need to advertise. When you do a business, there is insurance. When you do a business, there are these expenses. This is how you calculate profit and loss. But he is just making cabinets. His peers are doing accounts, learning how to manage books of accounts, while he's just doing cabinets. And then at the end of their academic year, yes, they may decide to go vocational. And they have all these skills that they have gathered that will be very useful in their vocation.
Even in making cabinets.
Exactly.
You need to calculate how many screws you need and what measurements you
profit
need to.
and loss.
Yes,
do
absolutely.
the accounts, do the trial, but know the purpose. What is banking? What forms of financing are available? You would get that if you were doing the subjects that everyone else is doing. So my question is that because of tracking robbed them of their ability to get something out of
the mainstream
education. And once they are there, they are not able to run successful businesses because of the lack of the other soft skills that they would have gotten had they remained in the mainstream. But yes, do the cabinets, yes, do the fashion and fabrics, yes, do your food and nutrition and all that. But they would be able to get other skills that everyone else is getting, and to me that is discrimination.
And was the ministry aware of these developments, that in mainstream education all these children are now being lumped into a vocational system and not by choice and without the information of the parents knowing?
I think, like I said, our disability education system is very flawed. Firstly, we don't have a policy framework that supports it. So as a country, we don't have an inclusive education policy, because within that policy it would be clear what are the school's responsibility, the government's responsibility, the family responsibility.
Right.
It would also be clear what kind of communication is necessary between the parents, the school and the state. And so that we are all in the loop about what is going on. The lack of a policy framework has resulted in us not strengthening where we need to strengthen. So for example, if you are talking about children who are deaf and hard of hearing, the missing link is just communication. Are they able to access content, access to the curriculum in the classroom? And if they can't access that, they are just being babysat. You are simply babysitting them, as my son was being babysat for those many years while at school. And then you offload them into the streets. And we wonder, where are these people coming from? Too many people who are selling airtime who are deaf, where are they coming from? They have just been offloaded into the streets.
Now, I'm aware that you've initiated the Forum on Disability Education in Zimbabwe. Do you want to just shed a bit of insight into what you're planning to do in terms of that forum and what its objectives are?
The Forum for Disability Education was convened in order to be more systematic, to be more organized about the issues that we are advocating for. It is composed of organizations that deal with different disabilities. So you would find that within the forum are organizations dealing with Down syndrome, organizations dealing with visual impairment, organizations dealing with mental or intellectual disabilities, organizations dealing with physical disabilities. So all the reason why we are doing this is that we are saying that learners with disabilities are not homogeneous. They are different and diverse in their needs and in the kind of support that they require. So you find that the resource unit has not all been a failure. It has worked for learners with visual impairments. That is why today you will find a number of lawyers with visual impairment, social workers with visual impairments, because the resource unit worked for them. But did it work for everyone? No.
So you are about trying to achieve and attain full inclusion for all the different varieties of disability.
Absolutely.
Right. Do you think it's attainable?
Yes, it is, with the will. I think the reason why we are where we are today is that there is a lack of political will to tackle disability education head on. The lack of political will can be demonstrated by the fact that the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education has developed an inclusive education handbook and not a policy. So they are developing a school financing policy, a school feeding policy, an ECD policy. But when it comes to inclusive education, where you would find the majority of the beneficiaries of the policy are children with disabilities, they make a handbook. And I did speak to them about it, and they said a handbook and a policy are the same. There's no waiting. And I do not want to use very strong words, and I shall not use them on this program.
And I shall not allow you to use them on this program.
I shall just say it just shows that we do not have the political will necessary to change the lives of 15% of learners with disabilities who should be in the school system. Because if we're saying 15% of people in Zimbabwe have a disability, we can infer that in every school, should it be an inclusive school, there should be 15% of children who have disabilities.
I want to believe that MOPSI are listening and will come on board, because what you're saying is very valid. And, we've been talking about being in a new dispensation, and we are very hopeful that we are moving ahead and things are beginning to change in Zimbabwe, including in our education system.